But what do you think is going right now?
Well, I think there's a lot going right. I think when you look at the excitement around college football, it's still as high as ever. I think when you look at some of the environments that we play in, there's so much excitement around the sport. And, now more than ever with social media and, all the different outlets, I think a lot of our guys are becoming household names. And I think people across the country just love college football. I think also, it's become more than just football, though. I think that, so many guys understand that, there's more to it than just what goes on in the field. And I think guys are grabbing onto that, realizing that, when football's over, what's next for me? And there's more opportunity than ever for these guys.
It's, a guy that I know you love and played for, and I've talked to a bunch. He calls them champagne problems. And Chip Kelly says, listen, there's a lot going right now. The kids are better players than they've ever been. The product is probably better than it's ever been. It's more popular than it's ever been. And, do we need to fix some things here or there or figure out things here or there? Yeah, absolutely. But to your point, there are guys, and a lot of them play for you. Marvin Harrison is basically a household name throughout football, regardless of level. And I think that that's a great thing. And I also think it's a great thing right now that we're starting to see college athletes have real impact in their own communities through NIL relationships and all sorts of community involvement. And maybe that was happening before, but I feel like it's more talked about now and more visible now. So couldn't agree with you more. Now, the hard parts of the sport, though, are there. And they certainly, I'm sure, weigh on you as the head coach. I like to call them CEOs of an entity. And they're much different than when you first got here as an assistant under Coach Meyer. What's changed the most for you since you got here to Ohio State?
I think when everything, I first got here, you think about like where things were and then where things are now. But I think the thing that stayed consistent is that every year there's been a lot of change. It really started early on. It was a big change for me to come here, and then it was a lot of change in 18, and then my first year in 19. Then there was COVID, and now you have the transfer portal, you have NIL. So one thing that stayed consistent is change, and things move faster now than ever. I saw or heard something that our guys now process more information in a day than they would in 1776 in a whole lifetime. Things just move faster nowadays. And so you have to be willing to adapt. And it's something that early on that I embraced was like, things are not just going to be the way it used to be. And to think that that's going to happen is to set yourself up for failure. So, sometimes you feel like you're driving without brakes going down the highway, but it's part of the process. I think it's part of the environment. And I think a big part of it is how competitive things are.
Sure.
When you're in an environment where things are so competitive, it's gonna change really fast. And so, being adaptive is important.
The scope of change, I think, is drastic. This has always been a sport of quick cycles, just because of the nature of the sport, and the kids are only here for, a lot of them in your program 3 years, but 4 years and 5 years. So there's always going to be quick turnover, and yet you throw in what I would deem as a fire hose of change of the transfer portal and NIL, and it just comes like barreling down. It was like an avalanche on college football. How in the world do you try to wrap your arms around that?
Like you said, it's coming on the heels of COVID, and then those two things, like you said, really makes it a challenge. I think we have to try to do the best we can of bringing everybody together in the sport. I think when different conferences come from different points of view, that's a challenge. But when everybody can come together as one, I think that gives us the best chance. I say it all the time that college football, the way it is right now, there's no precedence. There's no benchmark. There's nothing really to compare it to. I think we have to do something to get ourselves somewhat in line with some sort of a structure, whether it's like the NFL. Not that we're going to be the NFL. We never are. We're collegiate. Or something that has something to compare it to.
Sure.
We don't have that right now. So we're constantly going through and trying to blaze new paths. And anytime you have that, there's going to be chaos. There's going to be hard feelings.
Do you think it's closer now than ever to start at least looking at the blueprint of the NFL because of NIL, because of the nature of now the way that these players have become more famous? Now they're getting dollars, and rightly so, on their name, image, and likeness. And now maybe the powers that be in our sport are more reticent to look over and be like, you know what, the NFL does this pretty well.
Well, we have the model right there.
It's right there.
It's right there. And I think people are hesitant to say that because we are collegiate and it is college athletics. But these guys have been doing it for a long time and they know what they're doing. They have collective bargaining agreements. They have players associations. They have a playoff system in place. They have so many things that we can grab onto, like you're saying. Not that it's ever going to be the NFL, it's not. But I think the more times we can look to them for how they've solved some of these issues is going to be important.
You know, I'm a firm believer in all walks of life that there's nothing new under the sun. You know, those that came before us, and we might be doing it at a faster pace,
yep.
But everyone throughout history has dealt with similar problems, you know, whether it's culturally or in our sport. And the NFL dealt with very similar problems. One of the things that I think is a necessity, and you touched on it, is this move away from viewing college football in silos, right. Big Ten, SEC, Pac-12, whatever it is, and starting to view it more as a whole. And the reason that we can operate in silos right now is there's no overarching governing body over college football. People say NCAA. The NCAA is not an overarching governing body over college football. It's an overarching governing body of like a million sports and players of all walks. Do you feel like we need a college football governing body that just oversees this sport and tries to look out for the whole rather than the silos?
I mean, I think eventually there's a great chance that something like that can happen. I think that when, again, you look at structures that are out there that compete in this type of environment, that's typically what happens. I think we know what the challenges are. People come from different points of view, different parts of the country. And, you know, when there's different rules in place, different numbers of conference games, there's a lot of things that come into play. So, you know, the more we can start to get down that road, the better chance we have of starting to come together. I think we saw that during COVID. You know, the Big Ten, you know, canceled their season. The Pac-12 canceled their season. Other folks were playing. You know, at that moment, that was an opportunity to recognize the fact that when big things come down the tube, you know, we have to respond. Mm-hmm. And you could kind of see how we were a little segmented at that moment.